Y'all know about Plants vs Zombies. It would be weird if you didn't. It's a very popular series of games, developed by PopCap and EA, and is very well recognized worldwide, I'd say. I think more people know about it than the average game at least, but it's safe to say that for the past half a decade, PVZ has seemed to reach its final years. There's no real official projects coming out, and fan projects are always slow and not really capable of meeting the same level as a main series of games. In many ways, PVZ is more or less dead. And you know, instead of rolling up into a ball and crying, why don't we do something slightly more productive and try to do something to, well, celebrate instead? In this process of celebrating, I thought it would be interesting to look back and try to document everything I can about the PVZ franchise. Cover its highs, its lows, and anything else that I can. But, well, there's one game that needs to be introduced first, as it predates everything. And while it may seem random at first, it's fundamentally so important to the entire PVZ franchise that it may as well be brought up, as to not be forgotten in time. Introducing Insaniquarium. Insaniquarium is a very strange game. You could even call it insane. You see, the main creator of this game is an individual called GeorgeFan. If you haven't clicked, was also the main designer behind Plants vs Zombies, and listed as the main game designer for that game. Anyways, GeorgeFan used to work for a website called PrizeGames.com, which was a way for games to be distributed back in the days before Steam became the de facto means of that. Though I will admit I can't find much about them. Apparently, it was like an online version of Chuck E. Cheese, according to GeorgeFan himself. I am British, so this does not help me out, and I think it's slightly funnier like that. During his research, in his own words for said job, he found some really good Java games that were above the rest, made by a specific company. PopCap. He later decided to create a game about taking care of fish. He wanted to create an accessible game, which slowly evolved into something more complex, eventually adding other core mechanics that formed a core gameplay loop. This was submitted into the Game Developers Conference in 2002, and became a finalist. From there, GeorgeFan managed to get in touch with PopCap, and started to discuss publishing this game through them. He didn't work with PopCap at the time though, as he was actually employed by Blizzard! Of all companies! It certainly caught me off guard when I heard of that, I'll be honest. It first released in 2001, as a web-based online game. It got updates over time, and then got published on PopCap's official site in 2002, after they became a publisher. Insaniquarium Deluxe, the version I have played for this video, was then released in 2004 as a more standard PC game. In other words, this game is probably older than the vast majority of people watching this. That's fun. Anyways, that's the rough story of Insaniquarium's release. It established a relationship between GeorgeFan and PopCap, but as you'll soon see, it is very clearly the origin of Plants vs Zombies, in some very interesting ways. Insaniquarium lives up to the name. It's an aquarium that is, quite frankly, insane. I know I already did that joke, but it's the best descriptor, genuinely. The main gameplay loop includes you buying guppies. You then have to feed them, and they will eventually grow bigger. When grown, they will drop coins from some strange orifice I don't want to think about. Silver coins will be given from medium-sized guppies, and gold coins from large guppies. The parallels. This is a very simplified view of the game, and, to be entirely honest, inaccurate. Each tank will have its own gameplay style, in the form of new fish. Tank 1, for instance, has carnivores. Totally not piranhas, nope, it's a carnivore. Anyways, these will produce gems, which give 200 money when collected. Unlike guppies though, they don't eat fish food. They eat baby guppies. Yeah, this game is kinda mucked up. Like no, they straight up have blood textures too. And for the record, this is an accurate way to start off the game. You see, throughout the rest of the game, these things get eaten and killed constantly. carnivores return in the last tank, with an even bigger fish, a megavore, eating these smaller carnivores. Meanwhile, in the second tank, you have to feed fully grown guppies these star potions, which clearly are just drugs, and straight up murder younger fish when they eat them. Hell, in the third tank you get these creatures called Guppy Crunchers. The implication of Guppy Crunchers as a species is wild to me. There are just a whole species dedicated eating this one specific animal solely when they are young. Yet they are common enough to be buyable in bulk. Just why? Are these creatures specifically bred to eat this one species? They must be, as I can't imagine this is natural. Especially as they turn these guppies into beetles, of all things. So what? Is this super common in the Insaniquarium world? Does this imply that this is a common way to make money? I mean, hell, these beetles are specifically food for beetle munchers. So what? Did they invent this chain in order to maximize money? Is there just a whole business focused around sacrificing these things en masse? I mean, we already do this in real life. Seriously, I would go into it now, but there are some absolutely horrific and monstrous things we do to some farm animals. I would tell you what, but I really don't want to traumatize the kids in the audience, so trust me. What actually happens to a few species is straight up worse. Well, crap. I guess Insaniquarium is just a super realistic representation of modern farming techniques, an intuitive analysis of the capitalist nature of our society. Oh yeah, I forgot about the aliens. Aliens are a major thing in Insaniquarium, because aliens are cool. These will kill fish, but have a huge variety of effects that they use to do it. Some fire projectiles, some float around the board, some will just eat way too much food and explode, including a fish, and one heals from you shooting it with your gun. Oh yeah, you also get a gun, just don't worry about it. On death, most will give you a very useful 200 money. Enough to buy 2 guppies. It's technically something, I guess. Either way, with this money you can upgrade some things. Upgrading food improves the stats of the food, including how much it takes fish to grow, and how quickly guppies will become hungry again after eating. You can also upgrade the max amount of food in the tank at a time, as well as the amount of damage your gun does, which obviously makes the aliens easier to kill. In addition, you have some decisions before you start a level, choosing up to 3 pets from a wide selection of 24. You unlock 1 from each level, with an additional 4 unlocked from gathering shells, which are a premium currency that persists between levels. These pets have a huge variety of designs and ways to help you. You have your basic pets which help gather resources for you, like Stinky the Snail, Clyde the Jellyfish, and Seymour the Turtle. You then have pets that can help give you money, such as Nico the Clam, which gives you pearls every now and again, or Shrapnel the Robot Fish, which will drop actual bombs that kill fish they get in contact with, but gives you tons of money. There are also fish that help you defend a tank, such as Itchy or Rufus, which deal damage to aliens whenever they appear. But these are your more basic pets. As you go on, there are a lot of pets that have some very interesting abilities. The biggest example, Angie. Angie will revive fish that die, which seems like a useful ability, but it doesn't apply to fish being eaten. However, they are still one of the best pets in the game. Not because of themselves, but because of a specific synergy with Amp. Amp is an electric eel and will charge up over time. At full charge, it will kill all guppies currently in the tank, making them all drop diamonds. Now, with Angie, a good amount of them can be instantly revived again, allowing Amp to produce huge amounts of money with little risk. Max genocide for little cost. There's also Prego, the rubber duck that is permanently pregnant and spawns baby guppies constantly. This game was very much built in a very different time. The final pet in the main game though, is a little tadpole guy called Presto, who has a very unique ability of having the best frame in the entire game. Oh, and they also can just turn into any other pet at will, which is certainly interesting. With context, the game ends with a final boss against the Emperor of the Aliens. Instead of needing to get a lot of money, you instead need to survive against an onslaught summoned by this dude. He also murders your pets. This is truly a psychopath of catastrophic proportions. After beating him by shooting him a whole bunch, you unlock Presto, and the post-game begins. Right, I'm just gonna take a step back here. It's very clear that the pest system here is the precursor to Plants vs Zombies' well, entire gameplay loop. The player is given a selection of choices which synergize with each other in a lot of ways. You unlock one after every single level, and even unlock some additional pets with a currency that transcends individual levels. This is why I consider this a very important game to cover, before we get into PVZ franchise properly. In many ways, this game is a predecessor. Oh, and it's also a predecessor in another extremely key way. It has got a mobile port! You see, mobile games predate our modern smartphones. They used to exist in some old phones, such as Nokia's and such, and far weaker than modern games. This obviously meant they were, well, crappy is a bad word, but it is broadly accurate. It's funny, actually, because according to IGN here, Insaniquarium had 18 million downloads on its PC version, which shows to me that the game was, in fact, very successful already, with a mobile port handled by Glue, a seemingly prolific early mobile game developer that was bought by EA in 2021. Huh. Either way, it's fun to look at, and while obviously of a lower quality than the original game, it's very interesting for sure. Because here's the thing, doesn't Insaniquarium just scream mobile game to you? These games feature a lot of clicking and tapping, but are also extremely casual. With some strategy involved for sure, mind you, but still fundamentally very casual. I wonder if Insaniquarium came a few years later, so its mobile version could be more accurate, if the game would have performed even better for this reason. Why do I ask? Well, you'll find out at a later date. Probably. Anyways, a post-game. You get access to a replay of the original levels, except after each level, you can get access to this little minigame, which appeared before but is here to help the shell collection. It's alright. If you collect multiple of the same object, you get a multiplier, so it's not just spam clicking. It's interesting, I suppose, but otherwise it is just the main levels again. Not necessarily ideal. In fact, there is no actual new content, with only a time limit mode and a challenge mode left. Time trial works exactly as you think, though you can spend money to get extra pets at random, which is certainly neat, but it allows you to test yourself to see how much you can earn in 5 minutes. Fun for a while, but it's not quite my cup of tea. However, challenge mode is really good. You see, this mode only tells you that it increases the enemy spawn rate, but it actually does a lot more. You see, over time the costs of things will increase, and they do so rapidly. If you want quick, you'll find your guppies costing 150, 180, or even 200 money. However, all prices get reset when you get an egg piece. Normally, you can just save up money to get all of them at once, but here each one will cost more money than the last, and you want to buy them as soon as possible. I absolutely love this design choice, and this would genuinely be brilliant in a PVZ-like game at some point, but still, very fun game mode in its current state. I have just liked a bit more variety than just this mode. Finishing challenge mode runs also give you stories. Small snippets of deep, intense lore behind the pets and the motives. But yeah, it's incredibly fun to read. It has the same vibe as a PVZ in a fun way, including a final entry for the final boss, which is super cool and just cute. There's even an equivalent to the Zengarden, where you can feed and raise fish, which is pretty darn neat. It serves as an alternate way to get shells, the aforementioned premium currency, and it's just something fun to work towards. Actually, I should probably just talk about how I feel about Insaniquarium in general, because I realize I haven't yet done that. So, now you've got the rundown, this is the part where it's all opinion and I just talk about the game in general. I haven't actually played Insaniquarium before making this video, so I can say for a fact this was a hell of an experience to play. And absolutely murderous on your hands. There is just So much clicking. Way more than even PVZ1, which wasn't exactly great for my hands either. This is an issue because murdering your hands is generally considered a pretty bad thing for a game to do, which may come as a bit of a shock to some of you, but it is true. I want to start properly by talking about its age. Like, you can count the pixels on screen. And it's even in a fodder-free, a fairly outdated format. If you press the Windows button, the game will literally crash. That's not a joke. It must always be the main focus, like a mobile game when their brand isn't implemented into skill yet. It's definitely part of the appeal though, I think. Otherwise, a lot of the game is just a bit too much, because ultimately I prefer more chill and strategic games. Insaniquarium isn't really this. It's just a manic dash to the end, more or less, and while that can be fun for some, it's not exactly my style. However, I can appreciate it's certainly an extremely interesting game, just not one I'd really want to revisit for this. Overall, the visuals look very nice. I enjoy looking at these guys quite a bit. They have a lot of character for sure. The Guppy's utterly clueless face, the odd-looking beetle munchers, and the Megaballs certainly have a strong design. The pets also just have a ton of personality. It's super easy to implement personalities into them, just due to some great character design that makes it super easy to project, alongside stories and other mechanics. Plus, the game isn't exactly long enough for me to particularly become super annoyed at it. While I do think a lot of it can get old quite quick, it's also not exactly extremely long, and can easily and enjoyably be chipped away at over time. The pets are also fun to muck around with. I will say that it takes the last stretch for the really interesting pets to appear, which is definitely an issue. A lot of the early game is very much carried by the unique gameplay itself, which is definitely unique, but later on you get the more interesting pets that make the game actually super interesting. Presto in particular is super fun to use, so you have to constantly monitor and swap what pet is currently pretending to be. It's super fun. The main issue I think isn't really able to be worked around. Grind. You see, you need to get a ton of this special currency called shells to buy many things, and there isn't really a great way to get these quickly, at least in a casual setting. And these are needed. 4 pets are locked behind eggs that take absolutely huge amounts of these things, and some of them are pretty interesting and important. But I cannot get footage of them myself because the grind is too immense. I just know they do, and due to the single good postgame mode, it's not the most fun thing on earth. Overall though, Insaniquarium also costs less than £5. So you know, it costs as much to play as it does to get Snoopy in PVZ2, so it's definitely worth the cost. But I certainly wouldn't call this George's best. A lot of these ideas are indeed quite strong, but you know, they need a little bit of refinement. And they were going to get that little bit of refinement. After Insaniquarium Deluxe released, George Fan continued to work at Blizzard for a few more years, before he just got bored of working with Blizzard, finding he reverted to work on smaller projects as a designer. He eventually left so he could work on a new project. Eventually though, he ended up getting in contact with PopCap once again, who convinced him that this project would be better if he worked with them. Thus, he was given a small team, including Rick Werner, Laura Chigara, and Todd Semple. They would work together on a project that would change the shape of PopCap, and perhaps a part of the gaming industry in its own way.